what I found really impactful about DeFi and everything that was happening in Ethereum was the fact that they were really finding ways to not just provide decentralized money where people could have custody of their own assets, but also to be able to access financial markets and services like decentralized exchanges, lending protocols.
Christopher Friedland of the Texas Blockchain Council. We're here at the North American Blockchain Summit, and we've got with us Michael Lewellen, who is, as you can see on his pin, board member at the TBC, as well as you're over at Open Zeppelin, head of.
That's
I don't
correct.
know what your title is over there.
Oh, head of solutions architecture. It's a fancy title to say I work with both our tech team, sales team, and a lot of our top customers.
Okay, so you're the guy in office space where you're like, I'm the people person going between the different departments.
Yes. Except unfortunately, the translation is necessary in this case, especially when we're talking about smart contracts and security and what are the threats out there and how do people address them, and trying to explain that in short Zoom calls instead of taking all day.
So let's start. There's so much that we can kind of run through with your background, whether it's TBC or whether it's with Open Zeppelin. Let's start with kind of your journey through the process of like getting onboarded into the space and how that's evolved over time.
Started out with a good story about using my school's computers to mine Bitcoin back when that was feasible with your average computer back in 2012, give or take. From there, I was like, well, I've got a bunch of Bitcoin mining on these school computers. Let me figure out what it's really worth. Like, why is this worth? And then you go down the rabbit hole of what is money. And then Web3 and Ethereum started to come online. So I started to become a general purpose crypto consultant here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then after a while, I got my computer science degree, really branched into smart contract development on Ethereum when that took off in 2017, 2018. Worked with a couple of corporations like Thomson Reuters and Toyota on kind of some proof of concepts using blockchain and supply chains and tax abatement, that sort of thing. And then really branched over fully into DeFi and decentralized applications when I joined Open Zeppelin right around the start of COVID, I would say. It was a remote first company, so that made things easy. And been basically focused on smart contract security ever since.
Now, you've done a few different things in the space, right? So you started off with Bitcoin mining. You've ended up you've done the programming on smart contracts. Why did you switch over from Bitcoin over to some of the other protocols that are out there? What are some of the things that those protocols attracted you to them?
I mean, I think just honestly the fact that I was there when Mt. Gox happened. And Mt. Gox was for anyone who's experienced FTX, Mt. Gox was basically 10 times worse. It was responsible for 80% of the volume in the market. It really depressed Bitcoin for a while. And it was all around the fact that people, in order to actually be able to exchange between Bitcoin and dollars and other cryptocurrencies, they had to give up custodianship of their crypto to an exchange. So not your keys, not your crypto. But it's not practical to just only hold Bitcoin in keys and that's it. You have to still have some sort of a functioning financial market. So unless we wanted to be reliant on centralized providers, even the best providers like Coinbase and others that are good actors, you still take risks with them, even regulatory risks, such as those they might face in the US. So what I found really impactful about DeFi and everything that was happening in Ethereum was the fact that they were really finding ways to not just provide decentralized money where people could have custody of their own assets, but also to be able to access financial markets and services like decentralized exchanges, lending protocols, and a host of other things without giving up control of their assets.
When you said that there's Bitcoin's not the end all be all on both from the custody side, not from the custody side, from the centralized exchange. It's either Bitcoin or the centralized exchange. There's a collective gasp in the marketplace right now as the Bitcoin maxis are listening to this.
Yes.
But no,
to be fair, this was back then. There's some options on Bitcoin now, but even then, I think Ethereum is really, it's been where a lot of that experimentation has happened. Even a lot of OG Bitcoiners kind of became Ethereum people around that time. I mean, even Vitalik was OG Bitcoin until he realized that to be able to build what he wanted to build, custom smart contracts, there had to be a new platform. Because a lot of people in the Bitcoin space wanted to keep Bitcoin the way it is, keep it conservative, keep it safe and secure by not making it complex. And I think that's actually a good thing. We keep Bitcoin as kind of this gold standard for money that doesn't have to worry about adding in complexities or making rapid changes. And Ethereum can be where that experimentation occurs. And I think over time, we'll see more and more Bitcoin bridge over to Ethereum the way it is with Wrap Bitcoin, but maybe with even more trustless bridges. So I get into controversial territory, but that's what I'm excited about because I still like Bitcoin and love it and hold it, but I want to do more with it without giving up control.
So it's really, it sounds like you're seeing it as a spectrum. So
Yes.
here's the lane that it's in. Here's the things that it's very good at, very good at, and then here's some other avenues that still need to be in technology that need to be corrected.
Yeah, that's a fair
And
way to
so it does seem that there's anybody that's dealt with mortgages, anybody that's dealt with some of the traditional financial system, you get behind the scenes, and it is it's archaic. There's
Yeah.
stuff that's back there that's been built and it's encrusted for it's been out there for 20 years. You see that still in the with state agencies, when they're
yeah.
handling titles, right? And
Absolutely.
some people still pulling paper files, and Bitcoin's not going to solve that problem. Is what it sounds. Ethereum does have some capabilities that could be coded. You could trust math rather than a centralized institution.
Yes. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's, like, for a good example, there would be, like, for example, the best use case would be, like, someone who wants to, borrow against their Bitcoin. Like, I have Bitcoin, it's worth, like, let's say 150K overall, but I really want to put a down payment on the house. I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. I still want to have that long-term exposure. So there are options here in Texas, like Unchained Capital, that provide services for that using multi-sigs. But let's say that you can't use Unchained Capital, you can't get access to that market, or you're not even in the U.S. potentially. You're just in, you could be in the middle of nowhere, but you do want to realize the value of your Bitcoin without giving it up. One of the protocols I do work for as part of Open Zeppelin Compound Protocol, they were one of the first lending protocols to come up with a really nifty solution where you can deposit any sort of crypto collateral on Ethereum, including wrapped Bitcoin, for example. So let's say I deposit 150K worth of wrapped Bitcoin into the protocol. I can then borrow another asset against it, such as a stable coin like USDC. So I could take out a 100K loan, for example, and then use that to put a down payment on my house. And I still have that 150K Bitcoin waiting for me whenever I want to come back and repay that loan. And the protocol can do this without any third party, any reliance on what traditional financial services would require, like escrow or others, because it has that asset, that wrapped Bitcoin, and if at any point the value of Bitcoin goes down or the person fails to repay their loan, it can be liquidated on the market. So because it has access to that, you have a lot of you basically have the ability to create peer-to-peer lending without any intermediaries. And I think that's really, really valuable for people that otherwise wouldn't have access to those lending markets.
What would you say to the people that say that where their argument is, wrapped Bitcoin is not Bitcoin? You're taking a risk that you shouldn't take with that. What would your response
I would
have to be?
say BitGo has been a pretty good custodian, but there is a third party there in this form of BitGo providing, custodying the Bitcoin that is wrapped and minted on Ethereum. I think they've been a very good team for that, and they do have a very good open source method of showing transparency. The assets are always back, kind of a proof. They were one of the first to really do proof of reserves, as we now know it today more commonly. But I will say this, I would love to see a more trustless version of that. They've already seen several projects trying to make trustless bridges, use what Lightning's actually been used to build, and apply that to minting Bitcoin on Ethereum, where instead of a custodian like BitGo wrapping it and minting it, you actually have some rudimentary smart contracts on Bitcoin providing that and allowing you to then access Ethereum without introducing a third party. So I would challenge anyone who says that about wrapped Bitcoin to say, well, I'd love to see something better, because less third parties required to do those sorts of things, the better. And I think the more, let's just say this, Bitcoin's very popular, and the fact that you see almost 10x the amount of wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, almost 2 to 3% of the supply of Bitcoin on Ethereum effectively, far more than there even is in Lightning. That shows you there's demand. And I'd love to see this sort of demand if we had a purely trustless version of wrapped Bitcoin, so even more people might be willing to utilize Ethereum without giving up control of their Bitcoin, because that's what I would want at the end of the day.
Right. Now, are you seeing some progress on the Thorchain side where you could see that develop, where you can see where, right now you've got trading that, move Bitcoin to Ethereum and be able to trade back and forth. It's being used, on the trading side and switching out assets. Could you see something that gets developed there that's around?
I definitely think so. I usually pay attention to my friends who use Thorchain. I haven't used it enough myself to comment, but I do think it's good to have, like, you could say more, they're not built on a specific blockchain. They're kind of like blockchain agnostic, and they try to connect a lot of different things and settle them as trustlessly as possible. From what I remember of Thorchain, there are still some, third party, like multi-sigs or others, trying to make sure that the whole thing operates smoothly. Don't quote me on that. But I think it's good to have those options available. If you don't want to be Ethereum centric, you want to be more agnostic on a blockchain, then I think it's a good thing to have, and it's also if Thorchain can do something better than Ethereum can, then it's good that it pushes the envelope and forces other applications on Ethereum to think about how they can do better. And if that means making more trustless versions of Bitcoin or other collateral that's cross-chain, all the better. More
competition is good.
Oh yeah,
competition is good. Everybody has to improve, or you either improve, you develop the technology, or you get left behind.
Free markets, free world.
Free markets, correct. Now, okay, so one of the things that's interesting about your career and the process that the journey that you've walked is that you've gone on the mining side, you've developed on the the smart contract side, you've also gotten involved on the policy front here with the TBC and being a board member. What drew you into that?
A mix of things. Obviously, I like to talk, so that's helpful in policy. But more importantly, is like you could definitely I've been doing this since 2012, and the more I saw all the hype happen in multiple market cycles, and a lot of that was saying, "Hey, we can apply this technology to make people's lives better." But then you see this project, name any project, a real estate project, a tokenization project, talk a big game, and then a couple years later, nothing seems to have happened. And more, when I talk to people that were doing this, why didn't this turn out? It was the policy and the regulations, and it was either they couldn't do it in the U.S. or they didn't have clarity, they couldn't get investors comfortable, and so more and more you could see that policy was really a big barrier to this hitting the mainstream. You could still build the tech, but people are not going to be comfortable using it, especially institutions, especially average consumers. So that was clearly a problem. I personally just like history and the politics of it all was fascinating to me. And then, like probably a lot of us who are here today, we met Lee, or I met Lee, and he, we both went to UT Dallas together, and he was one of the first. I was kind of one of the first cohorts that he brought in to start forming the TBC, and I kind of came in as the token Ethereum guy, the guy that could speak to some of the technology.
You were on the podcast originally, I think. It was Brian, right?
Yep, exactly. So right people, right time. But I mean, I've been involved ever since, and it's been an absolute blast. I mean, Lee's obviously been doing a great job of bringing policymakers together, and then he puts them in a room, and people like me and others can talk to him about what we see as impactful. When I spoke to some of them saying, hey, if you use smart contracts for sales tax, for example, you could get the sales tax coming into your coffers in real time instead of waiting at the end of the year. And suddenly policymakers, their eyes light up, and it's still going to be, I think, a long ways out before that hits the mainstream, but that's something that when they start seeing the positives for them and their constituents, then they start to get really interested. And that's also allowed me to do things like work at the federal level on policy issues like Tornado Cash. I've done some research with Coin Center, trying to make sure that the federal government doesn't go overboard with the way they try to regulate and go after real bad actors, but usually, going after privacy tools like Tornado Cash or things like it that are just trying to give people options to be private. And when bad actors use it, then, there's a sledgehammer approach from the government. And while I want the government, as many people here do, to be able to go after bad actors that are bad for the space in general, we need to make sure they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that requires usually very detailed discussions of what these tools are and why they're different than, for example, let's say a Bitcoin mixing service that's out there and operated by someone. Tornado Cash is different because they're smart contracts. There's no operator. They're completely independent, decentralized. And so when policymakers start banning that sets a really bad precedent for technology to be afraid of government coming after them and basically wholesale banning them because of one bad actor that might have come through. And in
banning them for code.
Yeah, and for Tornado Cash, they never even were able to really prove that any more than 20 to 30% of the activity on Tornado Cash was illegal. And so while that 20 to 30%, there needs to be solutions to that. And there have been discussions of things like privacy pools as a way to potentially address that and be able to differentiate bad actors from good actors in privacy. We still have to have a serious discussion about, okay, at the end of the day, the technology, privacy, and other things like it, just like encrypted communications, need to be available to the common person so they can protect themselves. And when you go and ban that technology to try to prevent bad actors from using it, bad actors usually continue to use it. Tornado Cash is still operating today, but a lot of people that would otherwise use Tornado Cash for normal, I just want to protect my privacy purposes, no longer can because they risk violating a government sanction. So in reality, we really only exclude that use for bad actors that don't care about laws, and good actors and citizens that just want to protect themselves are left out in the cold with no good solutions.
Now, do you see right now, as you've navigated that space, you talked about policymakers, have you seen an evolution of them coming around to the technology and being interested in educating themselves? Has it been somewhat stagnant? Have you seen, a real embracing of upgrading their education in the space? What have you seen in that department with legislators?
I definitely think we've seen an improvement, like just over the last 10 years, even in the last couple of years. I mean, the summit here, we have several senators coming in to speak about this. It's definitely been a massive improvement since the last couple of years. And then we've also seen, I think a lot of the people on the regulatory side or in these agencies have realized that there's actually a lot of advantages to supporting this ecosystem. For example, the FBI and a lot of federal agencies have spoken to folks like at Coin Center that have been advising them for years on this is what the industry is, this is how you should think about it. And they've realized instead of trying to go after and kill crypto or restrict the usage of crypto, they've realized that because of the public and transparent nature of it, it's actually easier to go after bad actors and track them and potentially catch them because everything is public and accessible, and federal agencies can actually use this to their advantage to go after bad actors. And we've seen this with, like, for example, the Bitfinex hack that happened, I want to say 2015, 2016. The people that were laundering money for that were caught years after the fact because despite all that time passing, the data is immutable and on the blockchain. And as soon as you were able to correlate, hey, that's tied to this last hack and it seems like that money's connected and it seems like they're potentially laundering it, let's go after them. I mean, it actually creates an environment where even though people can move money quickly in crypto, the data is out there forever. Whereas if you're trying to go after a money laundering in traditional finance and banks, you have to go and subpoena every bank account and every potential financial transaction that can be very hard to piece together compared to blockchain. So there's actually a lot of advantages for law enforcement as well as financial institutions trying to do AML KYC because you have all this data available and a lot of solutions to make use of it to catch bad actors and notice bad activity that you can then crack down on, not on the technology level, not on like the permissionless layer of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but within exchanges, within operators that are connecting them to consumers. That's where we should be doing enforcement, but not on the layers themselves. That's what policymakers need to understand. These things should be permissionless because that gives a massive advantage for the technology platform. It allows everything to move quickly and innovate, but you still have a lot of options on top of that to go after bad actors, but doing it through actual third parties because these platforms, Bitcoin, Ethereum, even a lot of smart contracts are not third parties. They're not the ones that should be criminalized. It should be the bad actors and any businesses that are knowingly or recklessly encouraging those bad actors, which comes down to companies and organizations that actually have custody of assets, not smart contracts or anything where, essentially it's decentralized. And that line of decentralization is very blurry even for those of us who are very sophisticated about it. So getting policymakers to understand it is difficult.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's the code, right? So the code is the tool. Code is the tool. And then it's how is that tool being used out there? Don't ban the tool itself. Don't try and lock that down or forbid it.
Exactly.
How do you navigate it? How do you implement it in so that it doesn't just go offshore? That that tool is being used by bad actors, and then people that do want to use it for good, or they just want to have the privacy side of it. Let them still do it. Just understand what how it's being implemented and who's allowed to, how they're allowed to use it and how they're allowed to interface with it.
Yep.
It sounds a little bit there.
Exactly. Yeah. We've got to make a friendly ecosystem. We don't want to lose a lot of innovation to other jurisdictions that will then be setting the standards for how this industry will work because it's happening whether it's in the US or not. But that makes a big difference for a lot of people in the US that do want access to new sorts of financial services. And they want to be able to do it with some sort of consumer protection from the government, maybe some ways we can improve it, but still have a general free market dynamic that allows it to innovate and improve.
Have you seen a transition from the location of coders in the U.S. on Web3 versus out of the U.S. over the past year, 2 years, depending upon the regulatory environment?
Absolutely.
Seen a migration, and where has that gone? What's happened there?
Ever since we've seen the actions of the current SEC chairman Gary Gensler, we've seen a good amount of people move their operations or even their livelihoods outside of the U.S. They've moved to Portugal, to Bahamas, the UAE or Dubai, other jurisdictions, Singapore, other jurisdictions. Yeah. No. A lot of these have become hubs for crypto and blockchain innovation because the U.S. has just not given clarity to, and many times been actively hostile towards this industry. And people, the whole idea of crypto is that, you're self-sovereign, therefore there are other places you can operate without being in the U.S. And even though a lot of them want to be in the U.S., they want access to that capital, they want access to those consumers. And some of them, are American like myself, want to stick around. I'm sticking around for now, but I mean, there is going to be a point where I have to choose between my livelihood and my career and technology that I'm passionate about and my country. And you never want to have to make that choice, especially when there's a lot of good that crypto can do here in the U.S. with a soft, let's say, informed hands from the government, which is typically to allow innovation to occur and only to bring in regulatory, let's say, consumer protections and regulatory clarity, where when it becomes defined that there's a problem and there's understanding. So we need to build a little bit of give and take where people are allowed to experiment with new ideas, and then eventually some regulatory clarity comes in to ensure, things like financial services, regulatory disclosures, how financial services market themselves to the average consumer who's not sophisticated. We do want protections for them, but it's going to have to come in lockstep with educating the policymakers that are going to write that. And they should definitely be very informed and very aware of the implications of writing it, the wrong policies before we let them start going after what has now become $1 billion industry that we see only growing over time and might become crucial if we ever find ourselves in another financial collapse. This might be the lifeline for a lot of people. It already is in Argentina, where their financial system is collapsing with over 100% inflation. They need this, and the failures of government is what really has made crypto popular there. But I think in the U.S., I hope we avoid that sort of financial collapse, and crypto might very well be the thing that helps us. Maybe getting ahead of that and integrating crypto into our financial system slowly but effectively could prevent that from even being necessary. But if we do find ourselves in that situation, 2008 all over again, crypto could be what a lot of people use to save themselves in terms of their financial future.
Technology always seems to move faster than legislators, and the legislators themselves, they have to be they have to understand what it is, the technology that they're making rules on. I mean, I think we recently saw this with the executive order on AI. And the lack of understanding around, the acceleration of technology and data, and the regulations that are built now based off of the benchmark, 10 years down the road, the capabilities that's going to be every single device that you own is going to be under that jurisdiction. Because it's regulations are so far behind and they just stay in place. We saw that with the $10,000. It was specifically for the wealthy, and then it just never changed. And then inflation hits, and now it's applying to everybody. And now switch it to the 600. So appreciate you jumping on today and running through all of this. Is there anything else that people where they can get a hold of you, and the type of people that should reach out to you? Connect free with you for Open Zeppelin over the TBC.
Yep.
What are your socials, and who should be reaching out to you?
You can find me at Lewellen Michael on Twitter, LinkedIn, Michael Lewellen. You'll probably find me. I don't have a Y in my L. That's the other Lewellen that you can find. And then, for Open Zeppelin, we do smart contract security, anything with Ethereum or built on Ethereum like technologies. We do a host of security services. Our library, ERC 2721. It's the common standard. If you're doing DeFi, you're probably already using it. So you can definitely find us there for anything we can help with. And then on the TBC and policy, TexasBlockchainCouncil.org. Become a member. Join the group if you're here in Texas, or if you're in any other jurisdiction. There's tons of state associations that are forming and working with us in partnership to make sure that we use the mini experimenting areas and states to push the federal government to act as well.
We can all work together. Well, on behalf of the TBC, just want to thank you for the work that you do, both on the appreciation for the Bitcoin side, the Bitcoin miners, also on Open Zeppelin, having a secure protocol with smart contracts on Ethereum, and just appreciate the work that you do out there. And it's always good chatting with you.
Oh yeah,
it's always good. There's always something that comes up on it. So thanks for coming by.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Hey guys, thanks for coming out to the 2023 North American Blockchain Summit. It was the best summit yet. We look forward to hosting you again next year. If you enjoyed the summit or like what you saw in this video, be sure to subscribe. If you're interested in learning more about membership in the TBC, go to TexasBlockchainCouncil.org to learn more.